Britain in the 1950s was a proud nation quietly rebuilding itself from the ashes of war, and nowhere was that ambition more visible than in its motor industry. Manufacturers were dreaming bigger than ever, promising the public cars that would define a generation. But behind the showroom glamour and the breathless press releases, something darker was brewing. Engineering disasters, styling catastrophes, commercial humiliations that would haunt boardrooms for decades. Today on Britain Rewind, we are counting down 10 of the most catastrophic British cars from that turbulent decade. And by the time we reach number 1, your jaw will be firmly on the floor. Let's start our countdown with number 10. Number 10, Standard 8. In the early 1950s, Standard Motor Company faced a challenge familiar to every British manufacturer. How do you deliver an affordable family car to a nation still counting its pennies after wartime rationing? Their answer arrived in 1953, the Standard 8. On paper, it sounded reasonable, a compact saloon designed for the working family, priced to sell, and built to last. But the reality was altogether different. The car arrived almost comically stripped of comfort. No exterior door handles on the rear doors. No opening rear windows. No heater as standard. Just 4 wheels, a weak 803cc engine that wheezed rather than roared, and a body so plain it made a council house wall look decorative. Journalists were politely horrified. The public felt underwhelmed. Dealers struggled to mask their embarrassment. Here was a car that asked Britain to settle for less, and Britain wasn't entirely willing. But if you think this was bad, what comes next will genuinely surprise you. Number 9, Hillman Husky. By 1954, Rootes Group had decided that Britain needed a practical compact estate. Noble idea. Terrible execution. The Hillman Husky was born from an aging platform, stretched awkwardly into a stubby, boxy body that managed to look ungainly from every conceivable angle. The interior offered barely enough space to avoid disappointment. The boot, despite the estate pretense, was only marginally more generous than a standard saloon. Road noise crept into the cabin like an unwanted houseguest and refused to leave. The rear suspension transmitted every crack and pothole in the road directly into the spines of its unfortunate passengers. The engine labored under any meaningful load, turning longer journeys into personal tests of endurance. Rootes marketed the Husky confidently as a versatile family companion. The British public responded with polite indifference. Sales were mediocre. The Husky quietly faded, leaving barely a mark on motoring history. And yet, what waits at number 8 makes even this forgettable machine seem almost admirable. Number 8, Austin A40 Somerset. The Austin A40 Somerset arrived in 1952 with a confidence that, in hindsight, seems rather heartbreaking. Austin had invested considerable energy into replacing its aging Devon model, and when the Somerset finally rolled into showrooms, the press gathered eagerly and the public leaned forward with genuine curiosity. What they got was a car that felt immediately behind its time. The Somerset's rounded, fussy styling looked like something conceived in the early 1940s, carrying echoes of pre-war thinking into an era desperately craving something fresh and modern. Mechanically, it offered no real surprises, and not in any reassuring way. The gearbox was famously stubborn. Interior quality was questionable for the price being asked. And while rivals were already exploring bolder, more progressive designs, Austin seemed curiously content to stand still. Buyers sensed it immediately. Sales never reached the heights Austin had anticipated. 2 years later, it was quietly put out of its misery. What followed in our countdown was considerably worse. Number 7, Daimler Conquest. Few names in British motoring carried as much prestige as Daimler. In 1954, the company unveiled the Conquest, a car intended to bridge the gap between luxury and accessibility, offering Daimler refinement at a more attainable price. The idea sounded compelling. In theory, it should have worked. But the Conquest arrived carrying a troubling set of contradictions. It wasn't quite luxurious enough to satisfy buyers seeking genuine Daimler grandeur. Yet it wasn't affordable enough to attract those looking for value. It fell awkwardly between two worlds, and neither world wanted it particularly badly. The bodywork, while conservative and handsome enough, offered nothing to excite any imagination. The fluid transmission system was famously temperamental and prone to expensive, dramatic misbehavior. And owners who expected the quiet, dignified reliability that the Daimler badge had promised found themselves disappointed. Here was a car that tried to please everyone and ultimately pleased nobody. The cars coming next make the Conquest's failure look almost dignified. Number 6. Jowett Jupiter. There are automotive failures that are merely disappointing, and then there are those that are genuinely tragic. The Jowett Jupiter belongs firmly in the second category. Launched in 1950 as a sports car designed to wave the flag for small, independent British engineering brilliance, the Jupiter initially showed extraordinary promise. It was light, agile, and its radical space-frame chassis drew gasps at motor shows across Europe. But beneath that exciting exterior lurked a ticking mechanical disaster. The flat-four engine was chronically unreliable, prone to sudden and catastrophic failure at the most inconvenient moments imaginable. Crankshaft failures became almost routine. Transmission problems haunted early owners without mercy. The company poured money desperately into resolving these issues, but costs mounted faster than solutions ever arrived. And by 1954, the Jupiter was gone, and so, heartbreakingly, was Jowett itself. The entire company eventually collapsed, crushed completely under the weight of its own ambitions. Few stories in 1950s British motoring are more painfully sad. Number 5. Barkley B60. By 1956, Britain's microcar craze was well and truly in full swing, and into this strange new market stepped the Barkley B60. On the surface, it looked almost charming, a tiny fiberglass sports car built for those who craved open-air motoring without the expense of anything larger. It was promoted with genuine enthusiasm, and early buyers were seduced by its distinctly unconventional appeal. But the Barkley's charm had a desperately short shelf life. The fiberglass bodywork was alarmingly fragile, prone to cracking under even the gentlest everyday stress. The front-wheel drive setup, progressive in theory, delivered handling that sympathetic journalists generously described as challenging. The tiny two-stroke engine struggled to motivate the car convincingly in a straight line, let alone around corners. Would you have trusted it on Britain's roads? As failures mounted steadily and word spread, Barkley's reputation simply dissolved. By decade's end, the company itself had vanished. A cautionary tale written entirely in fiberglass. Number 4, though, hits differently. Number 4, Peerless GT. In 1957, a group of determined British enthusiasts had a dream: to build a world-class Grand Tourer that could genuinely compete with the finest cars from Italy and beyond. The Peerless GT was their answer. And for a brief moment, it seemed possible. The car featured a glass fiber body, a tubular steel space frame, and a Triumph TR engine sitting at its heart. It looked dramatic. It carried itself with the confidence of real ambition. Early press coverage was cautiously encouraging. But beneath the surface, the problems were catastrophic. The space frame chassis flexed alarmingly under stress, creating structural concerns that alarmed even sympathetic testers. Corrosion attacked the car with frightening speed. Build quality varied widely between examples, suggesting consistency was never high on the priority list. Buyers who had dreamed of British GT glory found themselves stranded at the roadside instead. The Peerless name disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. And number 3? That's where things get truly strange. Number 3, the Gordon. If the Peerless represented misguided ambition, the Gordon represented something else entirely, a transportation choice so baffling it almost defies description. Produced in 1954 by Vernon Industries in Bidston, the Gordon was a three-wheeled microcar built around the absolute bare minimum of everything. Its single-cylinder 197cc V8 engine produced roughly 8.5 horsepower. On a good day, a figure that, even by 1954's austere standards, felt almost deliberately insufficient. The fiberglass shell offered passengers something marginally better than riding in the open air, though not significantly so. Performance was essentially non-existent. The interior suggested comfort had been briefly considered and quietly set aside. Hill starts on anything other than completely flat ground required more faith than mechanics could provide. And yet, somehow, the Gordon actually made it to market. The British public, to their considerable credit, quite largely ignored it. Not every dream deserves to be built. Number 2, though, takes these questionable British choices to remarkable and troubling new heights. Number 2. Bond Minikar MKC. The Bond Minikar had been shuffling along British roads since the late 1940s, and by the early 1950s its various iterations were still finding buyers among those desperate for economical transport. The MKC and its successors were three-wheeled machines powered by tiny V8 two-stroke engines, providing just enough momentum to technically qualify as a moving vehicle. But the most staggering detail, the one that defies belief even today, was simple: the Bond Minikar had no reverse gear. None whatsoever. If you needed to reverse, your only option was to climb out and push the machine backwards by hand. In 1950s Britain, in the rain, which was most of the time, the handling at any meaningful speed was deeply alarming. Build quality was wildly optimistic. And yet, remarkably, thousands were sold across Britain, which tells you everything you need to know about post-war desperation. Britain needed mobility. The Bond provided something. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for number 1. Number 1, Austin A90 Atlantic. This is the one. The car that encapsulates everything that went wrong when British ambition outpaced reality. In 1948, Austin unveiled the A90 Atlantic with a mission so bold it still takes the breath away. They wanted to conquer America, to plant a British flag in the world's greatest automotive market and sell cars to a nation that had never needed anything from across the Atlantic. The car was styled for American tastes: sweeping curves, a convertible option, chrome without restraint. Austin was convinced the world would embrace it. They were wrong on a devastating scale. In the United States, the Atlantic sold fewer than 350 examples out of 8,000 produced. Americans saw an overpriced, oddly proportioned curiosity from a country that simply didn't understand them. Back in Britain, the silence in the empty boardrooms was deafening. The Atlantic wasn't merely a failed car. It was a collapsed dream, the ultimate symbol of 1950s Britain reaching boldly beyond its grasp. And there you have it, 10 British cars from the 1950s that promised the world and delivered something very different. From stripped-out saloons to national embarrassments, this decade was a battlefield of ambition, miscalculation, and occasionally spectacular failure. But here's the thing, these cars are also part of Britain's story. They represent a nation that was trying, rebuilding, dreaming. Even when those dreams crashed and burned. If you've made it this far, drop a comment below telling us which one shocked you most. And if you want more British automotive history, subscribe to Britain Rewind so you never miss any video.